Welcome to another episode of Growth Hacker TV. I'm Bronson Taylor, and today I have Rand Fishkin with us. Rand, thanks for coming on the program.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Bronson.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this talk. I think this is going to resonate with a lot of the people watching. But let me tell the people a little bit about you. You are the CEO of Moz. You're the author of The Art of SEO, came out a few years ago. You're the co-founder of Inbound.org. You're a regular conference speaker, and by regular, I mean all the time.
All the time.
And you've been named to PSBJ's 40 Under 40 list, and Business Week's 30 Best Tech Entrepreneurs Under 30 list, and probably other lists that we don't know about. So does that about sum you up so far?
That sounds pretty good.
There you go. Now, that's a pretty awesome intro right there. But things haven't always been awesome for you or for your company, Moz, which is now called Moz, used to be SEO Moz. So I want to go back to the dark days a little bit, because that story, I think, will actually illuminate a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about. So let's start when you were in debt. So how much debt was SEO Moz in just a few years back?
Let's see. I think the worst we ever had was in late 2005 into early 2006. So we'd been essentially, burning cash. We had taken out a bunch of credit card debt and some equipment loans, business, lines of credit, that kind of thing from banks in 2001 through to 2004. And I think it was around 2005 or end of 2004, beginning of 2005 that we stopped being able to make the minimum monthly payments. And we had about maybe $120,000, $130,000 worth of debt. And so that ballooned up to $450,000 worth of debt. And remember, this isn't business debt. This is essentially personally guaranteed debt, which is why I still can't buy a house or a car or rent an apartment in my own name. We're renting an apartment, but it's in my wife's name. So, yeah, it's, it was a very challenging experience to go through.
Yeah, the joys of being an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
But, I've heard you say something really interesting is that the SEO Moz blog was really a turning point. And the reason I had you say how much debt you were in is because for a blog to be a turning point when you're in $400K of debt, like something's going on there that's worth understanding, right? So how is it that the blog could be a turning point? How does inbound and SEO save the day for you there?
Well, so the interesting thing here is at the time we weren't a product and software business, we were a consulting business. And in late 2003, the blog started. And it wasn't until the blog itself started taking off, which was in sort of '04, beginning of '05, that we managed to start getting higher value customers because they read the blog, they enjoyed the content and material there, they wanted to work with us, right? They felt like they knew me through the blog. And so they had a sense of, okay, this guy really understands kind of what's going on in the field and how we can drive more traffic to our website and what we need to do to improve. Let's contract him. Let's contract SEO Moz at the time, called SEO Moz. And that, ended up being the clients who helped us get out of debt by middle of 2007. We were completely out of that debt, or at least we had settled it, right? So you don't go, we didn't pay $450,000. So we called up a credit card company, said, hey, we owe you $2,000 in actual cash, and you put $10,000 of penalties on it. I mean, we owe you 12 grand. We'll give you 3, or you can sell it to a collections company, right? You can sell it to a collection, right? And you'll wind up with whatever you get from the collection company, $800. And so they'd usually take you up on that. They'd be like, okay, we'll write it off as bad debt, but it stays on your credit record. And so that. The blog was a turning point in that it helped us attract the attention of people who then were able to turn into clients and help us get out of that debt.
And like you said, initially you were services, you were consulting, helping them, that kind of thing. And now you become, I think, 100% product-based. But as you look back at kind of everything, the client side of things and the product side of things, the entire kind of history of the business, how much would you say of your business came from inbound as opposed to paid channels, things that you had to, pay-per-click or whatever? What percentages are we talking about here, just so people have a grasp of them?
Sure. So we did not spend a single dime on advertising or pay-per-click or any performance-driven channel until 2011.
Okay.
So literally never during the consulting business years, and not at all for the first 4 years of running the software company, right, which was 2007 through to today. Today and over the last couple of years, paid is about 15% of our free trials, right? So you go to Moz's website and you're like, man, I really want to get access to these tools. You can just sign up for a free trial. You put in your credit card. It starts a free 30-day trial, and then at the end of 30 days, it turns into a paid subscription. The process there is essentially that. Well, the interesting thing about that 15% of customers that we acquire through paid channels is that they tend to perform worse in terms of retention and customer lifetime value than those that we acquire through inbound sources, SEO, social, content, email, conferences and events, all that kind of organic stuff. And I think while that sounds kind of weird, it makes sense intuitively. If you found the Moz blog and you subscribed to our RSS feed and you started reading it and you went, this is really what I need to be doing. Right? I'm a professional marketer and I need help with this stuff and I want to monitor and track all these things, then yeah, Moz's product makes great sense. If you search for, rank tracking tool in Google and our PPC ad pops up and you're like, click, okay, they have a rank tracking tool, sign up. 4 months later, I feel like I don't need rank tracking anymore because my client doesn't care about SEO as much, turn it off. Right? So those, clients those customers who tend to stick with the product longer are the ones that are attracted to the content and the community as opposed to just, I need this tool.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing about that is when you look at our funnel, the more times you visit our website before you sign up, the longer you stay with us as a customer.
Really?
Well, so this is fascinating, right, Bronson? Because imagine this. Essentially, a lot of people think about, I want to do some growth hacks to increase my conversion rate, get more of the people who are visiting my website to become paid customers. And I go, I don't want that. I actually don't want that, right? I want you to come back a bunch of times. I want you to get into the blog. I want you to read the beginner's guide. I want you to try some free tools. And then after if you visit, I think the average right now is 7 times before you sign up for a free trial. But if you visit 12 times, you're going to be a far better, happier customer. Like our products are really going to serve you well, as opposed to folks who sign up their first or second time. And so that sort of intentional non-conversion rate, right? You can read a lot of the stuff. You can use a lot of stuff on Moz's website and never realize we have something to sell you.
Yeah. No,
and that's
great.
Intentional.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's such great advice on how to think about it because, me personally, like I don't quite see it that way yet, and I need to more because I'm thinking, oh, they've already been a couple times. What's wrong with me? When instead, if they've been a couple times, they're getting hooked more and more every time, and they're going to stay around. I mean, everybody talks about retention, but we never really connect retention with the amount of times they come to you before they sign up. And so that's kind of genius there. Yeah, now we're thinking.
Right. Well, you really want to have. I'm not saying that this is going to be true for every company, every business, every website. But what I am saying is, if you don't measure it, you'll never know. Right. So when you do the cohort analysis of what's the difference between customers who stayed with me a long time versus customers who quit, who left early on, versus customers who never even converted to paid, take a look at those 3 different groups and say, what characteristics can I find about them? And then how do I translate that into actionable items that I'm going to do in my marketing work?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, our audience is filled with people that want to have the same kind of story you have, right? Things aren't going so hot right now. They're in their dark days of 400K negative, that's what they're watching. And that's where a lot of people are at. They're in the middle of trying to figure this stuff out. And they watch things like this for hope, but also for advice. They're trying to figure out, all right, what do I do next? So I want you to kind of guide them a little bit, and that's where I want to take some of the questions here. So first, kind of at a high level, define inbound marketing for us. What do you mean when you say that, so everybody's on the same page here?
Yeah, so when I say inbound marketing, what I really mean are channels where you earn your traffic, your visits, your attention, rather than channels where you interrupt people to get their attention. And so it doesn't always necessarily mean paid versus non-paid, although very often channels where you pay are ones where you're interrupting someone, right? So a pop-up ad, a pop-under, a banner, a television ad, a billboard, a radio ad. It's like, no, I'm trying to browse the web here, and you're getting in my way. Or I'm trying to watch TV and you're getting in my way. I'm trying to drive down the highway and you're getting in my way. All of those channels are, in my experience, expensive. They don't produce as highly desirable results, and they don't bring you customers that are as valuable. They tend to be pay to play entirely, so there's no flywheel effect, right? In an inbound channel, think about something like SEO. You start producing a few pieces of content. You earn your first few links. Your domain starts gaining authority in Google. And now, as you start producing content, you need fewer and fewer links to individual pieces to be able to rank for them, because Google sort of recognized your site as an authority. That's the flywheel in action, right? That driving momentum that you build up over time. Yes, the first few turns of the wheel are really hard, but then it generates the momentum that keeps going. This doesn't happen in the paid interruption side of the world, right? That spammy email list that you bought from that guy, it's going to cost just as much to get another 1,000 email addresses, right? There's no sort of momentum building up. So this is what I really define as inbound, is that it's earning rather than interrupting.
You know, Rand, I love what you just said about the flywheel, because I feel like that's what's happening to Growth Hacker TV, like, as of today. You know, I woke up this morning and I'm looking at the analytics and I'm like, that's odd, because now Google is the biggest referrer. But I didn't have some like mastermind strategy there. I'm not an SEO genius. I just kept producing content.
Right.
And the flywheel wasn't going that fast for, 6-8 weeks, and for many people much longer than that. And now all of a sudden it's the main driver of everything. And so it's kind of like, that's interesting. That's happening this morning. It's kind of the first time it like tipped. And now you're coming on the show and telling me, yeah, that's what's going to happen. That's the way the world works now.
I think it is. I think it is. And this is just a super valuable thing to keep in mind about inbound marketing, is that you can get this incredible value, but you have to be willing to invest for a long time before you see the returns.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you think about how many interviews we've done here and how much stuff we've produced, but week one, nobody cares. Month one, nobody cares. Like, it's the flywheel. I love that phrase for it. Now, you've called inbound marketing a marketing hack that startups should love. What do you mean by that? Because this is Growth Hacker TV, so...
Yeah, well, so if I think about what a startup is good at, they're good at creativity. They're good at putting an exceptional amount of effort, providing incredible value. What they're not good at is spending hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to compete with big brands, right? In places like paid media, outdoor, radio, TV, print, even web banners and that kind of stuff, display advertising, video advertising. Those are areas where you really need a high budget. But what does it take to produce a great blog? What does it take to produce a great YouTube video? What does it take to produce a phenomenal graphic or a great slideshow? It takes creativity and energy and devotion to the content creation and to the promotion of it and to networking. That is a skill that startups should have, and a skill and a channel that startups should love. The other thing that's beautiful about this is it really shows that you can do marketing at scale. So if you can get this flywheel kind of going, you will be generating traffic that can turn into customers in a repeatable fashion that isn't going to require that you go and raise $10 million of VC money.
Yeah.
What startup doesn't want that?
Exactly. Sounds pretty good all around from here. Now, walk us through kind of the typical buying cycle nowadays, because I don't think people actually have a good grasp of this. I think they assume, people do a Google search, they click on an ad, and then they buy it. Like, they don't actually understand what goes into buying now. So walk us through that and tell us how inbound really plays a part of that story.
Sure. Well, I think this is it's a weird misconception for people to have, because nobody ever thinks to themselves, the last pair of shoes that I bought on the internet, the last conference where I went via the web, the last time I subscribed to a piece of software, all I did was search for what I wanted and then I bought it right away. Nobody does that. Nobody does that, right? What you do is you might perform a search and you evaluate several vendors, and then you talk to your friends and you look on Facebook or Twitter or Quora or whatever it is, right? Whatever channels you're involved in, to kind of get some information about that provider, and then you make an informed decision. Or you don't even know that you need something, and you stumble across this fantastic interview with let's say a guy who, I don't know, maybe provides great WordPress hosting, and you think to yourself, yeah, my WordPress blog has been having a lot of stability issues. Let me move it over to WP Engine or whatever, because I really enjoyed what Jason and the guys over there had to say, and that seems like a great company. I'm going to do that. That's a true buying cycle, right? It either starts with a considered kind of list of all the things I'm going to evaluate, or it begins more organically. But I almost never see the, oh, wow, really? Lose 60 pounds in 30 days? Yes, that is for me. Click, I'm going to do that, right? Come on. I mean, that's a very small subset of the buying audience, and certainly not most of the more sophisticated customers that startups are chasing, particularly B2B, but even B2C. So that buying cycle to me means you have to have some inbound.
Yeah. Do you think that companies, startups, they're lured by intent? Because that's what we hear. When somebody does a search on Google, it's intent-based. They're looking for something. So if you can come up, and be the answer to their intent, it's magical. Do you think we're lured by that when that's just not reality a lot of times?
I think it's important for us to continue to pay attention to that. One of the things I worried about, especially a couple of years ago, as social was getting super hot, was that I heard a lot of, when I go down to the Valley and go to San Francisco, a lot of this like search is dead. No, so search is an old channel now. It's going to be all about social, mobile, local. Sort of like, yeah, those things are still search. Mobile and local especially are still search. And so I'm glad to see that it feels like we've conquered that mentality of search is dead. However, I do think that while you should be passionate about an intent-driven query, and Google does drive an incredible amount, 50% plus of web traffic. I think Conductor did a great study recently where they evaluated 320 million visits across a large number of websites and looked at the traffic distribution, and it was about half Google, right? Half is Google search. So that's still a way we navigate the internet. But I would caution people against believing that all they have to do is appear in the results. SEO and PPC is not show up. It's show up and provide all sorts of other great stuff. Make sure you're good at other channels. Make sure you've done some PR and some press so that there's some reputable outlets saying some things about you. That really builds up trust in consumer. Make sure there are some reviews out there. Make sure that bloggers have talked about you so that when someone searches for your brand, they can see lots of people saying nice things. Make sure that you've got a compelling website that provides all the answers to the information they're seeking, not just a page that can rank number one. If you just have that one piece, you are going to be losing out to people who are ranking 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 who have all those other channels. I can't tell you how much it means to be multi-channel in this day and age.
No, well, that's great to hear that from the inbound expert. When you tell us that focus on everything, but inbound is massively important. It's a very holistic way of viewing things. It's not us versus them. It's not forget about that. I mean, you even said, I think 15% is pay-per-click for you. So you're playing in that world. It's not the main thing, but it's not nothing at the same time.
Absolutely.
And so I like that. I like that kind of attitude. Now let's talk about content a little bit. Because tell me if I'm wrong here. When I think about inbound, my head just thinks about content. I think, okay, that's kind of the engine, the heart. It's the thing that makes inbound a possibility. Is that kind of the way you view the world? And just tell us, how important is content, and how do you define content? Because I've seen you talk about it in some unique ways before.
Yeah, so I agree with you. Content is very often to almost always the engine driving inbound. However, that being said, I strongly urge people to kind of think about how they want to do their marketing as finding an intersection of 3 Venn circles, right? So one is what you're passionate about and love to do. One is where you're uniquely qualified and great at making something that will be valuable and interesting. And the third is stuff that is hyper valuable to your customers and to potential customers, and or to people who influence potential customers.
Okay.
There's a lot of businesses out there who are targeting people who are not very web savvy, aren't going to be using a lot of social media or blogging, or they're barely going to be using Google, right? And so for those people, it's really, who are their influencers? How do you reach them? And then, finding that intersection. If you find the intersection of all three of those, I think you're in luck. But that could be a lot of different things. For some people, that's, I'm a great blogger. I can write regularly, every day or every week, produce something really interesting that other people want to share. For some people, it's, I'm more of a once every 3 to 6 months, I can produce something really fantastic, a big resource that I've invested lots of research and effort into, and it's going to be a visually based, graphics heavy report on the state of an industry. And that's what's going to attract a lot of my traffic and customers. I'm not a daily blogging kind of person. And for other people, it's, I'm great at making slideshows. I'm going to use PowerPoint. I'm going to create a lot of SlideShare visuals, and SlideShare is a great place to drive tons of traffic and get a lot of views, and that's going to be my platform. Other people, it's, I'm really good at interacting with people over social media. Twitter's great for me. Facebook's great for me. And for some people, the internet's not a fantastic platform. They're like, I like going door to door. When I meet people in person, I'm great. Great. Set up those coffee meetings, build that network, and let that network do your web marketing for you, or hire somebody else to do it, right? So find your passion, find what you're good at, and find that intersection with what your customers value. I think that's the content that you need to be creating. And then that will be the engine that drives social shares, links that send traffic, SEO, that earns you rankings, people subscribing to your RSS feed, people paying attention to your website and navigating directly there, building up a brand on the web that people are familiar with and have positive associations with, getting press and media, all those different inbound channels, right, of which there's so many now, can all be driven by, what I'm loosely defining as content.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I love the Venn diagram there. And just to remind people, even if you find that intersection of the three, it's still a flywheel. You have to get it going. So you find the intersection, and there's still crickets. Nobody cares.
That's right.
And then you work, and you work, and you work, and things start to move along, and then you have something really meaningful happen if you stick with those three kind of Venn diagrams and really work the system you've created there. Now, let me ask you something I think is really important, and I almost don't even know how to ask this question. I have something inside I'm trying to get out, but I'm not quite sure what it is. It's the idea that the companies that are good at inbound, we know them because there's so few of them, right? Like, we know them off the top of our head. I mean, I had the people on the show, and it's like, it's just like they're household names because of all their inbound content they're doing and all the stuff that we know about them. Inbound is not built into the culture of so many startups. It's not on the radar, and yet the ones who do it are killing it. They're crushing it. I mean, they're growing, and they know why. They're teaching people why, because since they're doing inbound, they're always doing interviews like this, telling you what's working. Yeah. I mean, it couldn't be more not hidden how it's working. How do you build inbound into the culture of your startup when it's such a powerful channel and yet it's so ignored?
Well, so this is, I think it's a cultural thing, right? So it needs to start at a belief level, right? We believe in investing for a long time as opposed to getting short-term returns. We believe in, as a company culture, being able to fail at something for a long time and learn from those failures and iterate. And we believe in making investments that are marketing driven, not just product and engineering driven. Those cultural things are very hard for a lot of startups, right? I mean, that when I think about Paul Graham's essays over the last decade, and I think about the advice that I have always gotten from sort of Silicon Valley VCs, of which I've pitched many, right? It's always take a lot of money, right? Get a lot of traction, get it quickly, ramp up customers fast, have this investment cycle where you put dollars to customer acquisition and find a mathematical formula that scales up. That does not fit with the inbound methodology at all. That does not fit with the idea of, I'm going to invest a lot of time and a ton of hours into blogging for a year and a half before we really see any return. That is not what an investor wants to hear. That's not what a startup wants to hear. What they want to hear is, how do I be an overnight success, right? How do I turn on pay-per-click tomorrow and get 5 customers for every $20 I spend.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because I have $1.2 million in the bank, and I have 600,000 that I can devote to customer acquisition, and this is my conversion rate, and this is how many people I want to onboard, and boom, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the equation that they're comfortable with, and the reason why inbound is so successful, in my opinion, is because it lets you stand out from the crowd,
Mm-hmm.
right? When there's 100 people doing pay-per-click and doing social media advertising, doing display, doing big brands, doing old media, it's pretty easy to be the one of the world's top bloggers on modern network security software for mobile devices.
Mm-hmm.
Well, who owns that right now? Well, nobody does. Great. If your company provides this fantastic mobile app and you want to be known as the leader, you want to be the person the Wall Street Journal calls every time there's a security breach of a mobile device.
Mm-hmm.
Boom. You can be that person, but you can't do it by buying ads.
Yeah. No, I think it's great advice. And I like your advice because it's not tactic-based, it's mindset-based. You just have to come into it thinking very differently than all the peers that are at the conference, right? Than all
Absolutely.
the people that are in your co-working space. Like, you have to be the one that's like, no, I'm doing something different. It doesn't look like what you're doing. No one's excited about what I'm doing, but it's going to work.
And this is what's so weird to me, right? Is because this mindset, right, or bias exists,
Mm-hmm.
and yet, if you think about all the articles that we have ever read about, companies that have experienced fantastic success, there is always something exceptional about them. And I don't mean exceptional in terms of really, really good. I mean exceptional in terms of the exception to the rule.
Mm-hmm.
There is something exceptional about each success story, and yet somehow people get into this mode of thinking of, if I do what everyone else does,
Mm-hmm.
right? In the marketing world, especially, because I think a lot of people in the startup world think that their differentiating factor is product-based, software-based, code-based,
Mm-hmm.
Approach-based, not marketing-driven.
Mm-hmm.
And to really succeed in this field, you have to do both.
Absolutely. Now, this next question, I think you've already answered it, but I'll ask it real quick anyway.
Sure.
If you were starting a company today, what shape would your inbound efforts kind of take? What would they look like? And I ask it from the point of view of, you don't have a lot of resources, you have a small team, like you're not Moz, you're a guy in the garage trying to do some inbound. What would you do? And what I'm thinking the answer is the Venn diagram. Find where they come together, and the answer is it depends on you. But is there anything more than that you would say if you had resource, really limitations there?
Yeah, I mean, at the tactical level, one of the things that would be really important for me to set up is a lot of analytics, right? So I'd constantly be monitoring, hey, because I'm me, I know I'm going to be doing lots of social and lots of blogging and content production, and I am going to be measuring relentlessly. Mm-hmm. I want to see exactly which tweets of mine got, the most retweets, and I want to see the follower wonk, which is a company we bought. But right, I want to see the follower wonk, like who are the new people who started following me with the highest number of followers, and I want to start interacting and engaging with them. I want to do that on Google Plus. I want to see my ripples, every time I do a post. And I'm going to be constantly in analysis mode, probably for the first 6 months at least, before I start to get what I call like the seeing the matrix. Right? Like the guy's watching the screen and he's like, I don't even see the code anymore. I just see blonde, brunette, redhead. Mm-hmm. Right? And for me, it's like, I don't even see the social sharing and the blog anymore. I just see, 1,000 clicks, 2,000 clicks, 3,000 clicks. Right? I just see this is what's going to move the needle. This is what people really care about. And once you get that mouthfeel for your industry, it becomes almost second nature to produce stuff and to share stuff that people just love and link to and share and plus one and tweet and like. And that becomes your, an inbound strategy. And that's not exactly for everyone, right? Some people are going to do lots of different things, but getting that analytics set up early so that you can measure and get the sort of the intuition of what's going to work. Amazing what you can do once you have that.
Yeah, I love the Matrix analogy. I mean, that's perfect. I mean, how long does it take to get to that level of mastery? Just maybe with you personally or just in general, what you see. I mean, it seems like that takes a few years. That's not something that
Yeah,
happens
yeah.
in a few months.
I mean, this is, the classic Malcolm Gladwell 10,000
10,000.
hours thing. I don't think it takes the 10,000 hours, but I think it does take, you know, a few hundred to 1,000 before you start to get it. And certainly, again, this is that flywheel concept. It's not just that, all that content you're sharing is going to get all this extra attention and links and rankings and traffic. It's also that you yourself will become a more powerful driver of inbound value because you get this sixth sense.
Yeah, no, that's great. Let me ask you this: the people that master inbound, the ones that do it well, like I said, it's not that many. It doesn't seem like there's some of them. What do they have in common? What maybe habits they all have, characteristics they all have. Just is there any pattern matching that you've done against people that dominate inbound?
Huh. I don't know if I've ever done something like that, at least not in a way that's measurable. I could give you my intuition on it, but Bronson, I think that would be a phenomenal research project. That'd be so interesting. I should try and survey a large number of folks who are exceptional at this
So
and
you're seeing the Matrix right now. You're seeing.
I am. I'm seeing the Matrix right now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I think
it's
that'd be
fun for me
fascinating.
because I've had some people on. Like I had Joanna Lord on, who just
Uh-huh.
recently, worked for you. And I see so many similarities between you and her in terms of personality. You're sanguine. You like talking. You're very transparent. Like, that's just two people. But there's a little bit of pattern matching going on there. If I were to add in, Mike Volp, the CMO of HubSpot, I start seeing the same thing. Transparency, openness, a joy of being around people. So I don't know. Like, those are just some of the things that I'm starting to see. But I bet there's a lot more, though.
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of qualities. So I have a presentation that I'm going to be giving at MozCon that talks about sort of the secret ingredients of marketing. And I think some of the ones you mentioned are certainly in that transparency is a very powerful one. It's certainly not something everyone does or needs to do, but it is there. Being the exception. Being the exception to the rule is hugely powerful. And I think you see that in virtually all of these exceptional marketers who focus on inbound channels. I see people being very giving.
Yeah.
Right? They're essentially willing to give to almost to a fault. They're willing to invest a huge amount to help other people with no expectation or thought of return. Right? I mean, in the back of my mind, I always think, well, karma will have something good happen from this if I'm helpful to all these people. And that has generally tended to be the case. I think karma works extremely well. The concept of it, anyway, works extremely well in the inbound world and in the web world. I see people having authenticity, people who are authentic, people who you feel like, yeah, I know who that person is. I get them and I understand that they are being themselves and they're not trying to put on some, sort of bullshit facade just to earn my interest or my traffic. And I think when you don't see that authenticity, you fall flat. It just sucks. Yeah. Right? I just see terrible things coming from it and people hating on them and attracting lots of negativity. And I think karma, again, punishes that lack of authenticity. So those features, those traits, I think are, clearly secret ingredients of great marketers.
No, and the one that really stood out to me, they're all great, all the ones you just said, but the giving. Because, I look at your slide share, and I can't imagine how many hours went into your presentations. I just can't imagine. I'm doing research for this interview, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I don't know where to begin going through the amount of content that he's put together in the last 5-10 years. And it's all good. It's not like throwaway bullet points. It's deep and good and helpful and relevant. And I just think, okay, there's a reason inbound works for him because he worked it. He gave a lot to the community to make it work. And it's so true. The inbound people that come on the show, they always have SlideShare and they've always given a ton into their presentations and whatever their SlideShare is. Sometimes it's literally SlideShare, but whatever they've invested in, it's deep. They've invested a lot. So I think that's a great takeaway right there. Let me ask you this. Is there anything kind of on the flip side of pattern matching to avoid? I think you hit on it a little bit just now, but what should we kind of stray away from as we do inbound?
I think that there's a few areas where many marketers will get caught up in um, being wholly data driven and never investing in serendipity.
Okay.
And that
So
is
unpack that
actually,
for us.
yeah, so that's actually quite, it can seem to work well in the short run and tends to do poorly in the long run. So I'll give you an example. You sort of, if you find one channel that's performing for you and you give a couple other channels a try. So let's say, for example, that you go, hey, my customers are mostly on Facebook. I'm going to do, lots of Facebook posting and interaction there, but I just don't have time and energy to invest in blogging or Twitter or video at YouTube or SEO or conferences and events and SlideShare. So I'm going to kind of ignore all those channels and get this one flywheel going and invest in that, because I've tried those other ones and they just didn't work out for me. And my advice there is, you've got to be willing to let some serendipity happen, right? So if it's, hey, yes, maybe it is the case that you're just not seeing valuable visits come from Twitter, and even though you're doing multi-channel attribution, you just don't see people showing up in that visit funnel from there. I might suggest that you stick with it. Stick with it for a while, even if the metrics are saying this isn't right. I think there's a lot of those types of channels where you need to just find your groove, and it takes a while. That would be something I would avoid, is getting data driven without the extra layer of letting your intuition also play a part. And having a belief in serendipity. Another thing that I do see some marketers getting really frustrated and challenged by is essentially conflicts with web developers and engineers. So essentially kind of saying, hey man, I can't do my job because these guys won't listen to me, or I don't have control over what happens on the website because that's the I think that many people, unfortunately, all over the business world, let their role define their influence rather than having their influence define their role. So if you are a marketing consultant and you get to a company, you get to one of your clients' companies, and you're working with the VP of marketing and that team, and they go, oh, I'm sorry, we can't make these changes because that's really owned by IT, and the CIO owns that, and we just can't touch it. It is not up to you to go, well, okay, I'll step back. I think it's up to you to go, let me sit down with that person. Let me hang out with them. Like, I want to spend time with them. I want to let my influence define the role that I'm going to play here and truly have an impact. And that's true internally too. I think the people who are really successful in the startup world, this is excluding founders, because they always get to have complete influence across whatever, kind of by virtue of their role. But for everyone else from the startup world who's listening to this interview, that would be a strong suggestion of mine. Don't let your role limit your influence.
No, that's great. I love that. Now let's talk about the product Moz a little bit, and I'm going to tell people kind of about our email exchange that we had last night and this morning. I sent over some of the questions that we were going to talk about today, and in that I have some questions about Moz because I want to educate our audience about the product itself. And your response was something like, let's not dwell on the product too much. I don't really want to do that. And I thought, okay, that's awesome, because that's inbound. Like, you get it. Like, you're coming on this show, doing an interview, giving us a great episode, not so you can talk about Moz for 80% of it. You actually don't really care if we talk about it because you know it all works out. Like, people are going to click through. You know they're going to end up on your stuff. You know that it's going to work overall, the karma stuff you talked about, whether or not you make it a commercial for half the interview. So I just wanted to say that to people so that they get, if you're going to do inbound, then do inbound. Like, do the pattern matching stuff we talked about. Really give. It's not about you. You have to go and give. Right now I'm trying to do some inbound personally, and I'm guest blogging. I'm getting some content out there. And one of the rules I have is just don't mention Growth Hacker TV that much. Maybe in the intro it's like, hey, this is Bronson from Growth Hacker TV, and then just give value for the next, couple thousand words. So anyway, I just want to point out that's a great trait of yours, and then it actually plays out in reality. But that being said, we are going to talk about Moz because, for my reasons, because I want people to know about it, not for you.
Sure.
So what is Moz? Who's it for?
So Moz, actually produces a couple products right now. The primary one that we have just launched in private beta and that we're kind of rolling out over the summer is Moz Analytics. That's our kind of $99 a month. It is really designed for professional web marketers. Mm-hmm. So if you're someone who day in and day out you're doing lots of content production, analysis of your SEO results and your rankings and your traffic, and looking at how your Twitter and your Facebook and Google Plus perform, comparing that against your competition. Moz Analytics is sort of a way to get all of that data in one place without having to go and pull from these sources. We also produce a couple of interesting kind of big data projects. One is our link graph called Mozscape, and that's essentially a crawl of the entire web or a good portion of the web. Mm-hmm. And giving you the ability to say, hey, who's linking to my competitors that's not linking to me? Where are those links coming from? What are they saying? Who just started talking about me? That kind of thing. And then we have a service called Fresh Web Explorer that uses an index we call Freshscape, and that's essentially a limited subset of the web that is fresh content produced on a daily basis. So we have that service subscribed to, I think, 4.5 million blogs and RSS feeds across the web, and you can do a search for my name or my brand name, or hey, I want to see people who have mentioned my brand name but haven't linked to me.
Yeah.
Give me all those people, and then I'm gonna go reach out to them and be like, hey man, you wrote about us but no linky. how about you fix that? Right.
That's great.
So that kind of stuff is all a part of the product.
Yeah. Would it be fair to say if somebody's been watching this episode and they're nodding their head after you get done talking, like, yes, I agree, I want to do that they should probably go check out Moz as a product because you're really empowering them to do the stuff you're talking about?
I mean, I think the nice thing about Moz is you can sign up for the free trial and figure out whether you're going to get value from it the first 30 days and not pay anything if you're not, right? So yeah. It's a nice kind of introduction mm-hmm. To it. But what I would say is if you're not at least semi-sophisticated with these channels, you might find the product a little frustrating. You'll be like, what are all these numbers and what are they telling me? What should I do with this data? Mm-hmm. I think one of the faults of our product right now is actually that it's not, it doesn't guide you to the action. The action that you take has to be kind of driven from your own intuition and experience and knowledge of how this data interacts with each other, mm-hmm. With each other. So that's something we'll need to work on in the years to come.
There you go. And here's a fun question I like to ask people that have a product because it really illuminates the product in interesting ways. What's one of those features where when people see it and they're like, it just kind of blows them away. Like, wait a second, is this magic? Is it black magic? How'd you do that? What are some of the features, one, two of them, that when people see it, it's like audible. They're like, wait, how?
Well, so I think I'll mention a couple of things off the top of my head that I think are just hugely valuable. I talked about Fresh Web Explorer. Mm-hmm. I think the ability to search for two things is just huge. One is who's mentioned my brand or my website but didn't link to me. Because those links are free. They're just, that is just like I send an email, I get a link. When does that ever happen? Mm-hmm. It will do wonders for your SEO. Like it'll just, blow it out of the water. It's incredible. That's awesome. By the way, it helps build a relationship with the people. So, if you reach out to a blogger who mentioned you and you're like, dude, that was awesome. I really appreciate it. By the way, I noticed that you usually link to people you mentioned. Here's our website. I didn't see it linked to in there. Let me know if I can ever be helpful again in the future. Boom, you get a link. Boom, you establish a relationship. Win, 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 win.
Yeah.
The other one that's hyper valuable both in there and in Open Site Explorer that people freak out about is just seeing who links to my competitors that doesn't link to me, or who mentions my competitors that doesn't mention me. It just gives you someone who's radar to get on, right? If you see that, I don't know, let's say you're in the footwear industry and you're like, okay, well, who's mentioning Clark's and Keen, but not talking about my brand, I don't know, Tevas or whatever it is, mm-hmm. right? Well, crap, I mean, mm-hmm. anytime you see multiple competitors mentioned, that's an opportunity for you to be included in there to make that relationship. Another big one is inside the tool follower wonk. There's a couple of super killer features for me. One is seeing there's actually a literal visual Venn diagram of who follows any two people. And so I can see, who's following you, who's following me, and who's following both of us. And what's super slick about that is if I pick a couple of people from my world, and I look at who's following me, who's following Moz, and then I export that Excel list, and I sort the list of websites by domain authority. That's my outreach list.
Yeah.
Like those people, I know they already know me. I know they already like me. I have a great opportunity to, whatever it is, guest blog for them, get them to retweet me, get them to share my stuff on Facebook. Like those, it's the best list you can possibly imagine for outreach targets.
Yeah.
And then the last one that I really love, especially for new folks, is when you first set up a Moz campaign, it goes and crawls your website and finds errors and warnings and issues. And sometimes it's just shocking to me how many people are like, oh crap, I put 302 redirects and Google isn't following them, and I could just fix those to 301s and suddenly I'd be ranking for all this stuff. Or, oh, I wanted to rank for this keyword, but I don't have any pages with that keyword in the title. Don't! Right? It's just like that kind of simple stuff that helps people get their SEO going.
No, I'm so glad you went into some of those, despite your reluctance, because those little anecdotes, they illustrate, oh, that's what it could do with a little bit of creativity. Those are the kinds of things I would walk away from the product being able to put into place. And that's what people need, just a little bit of a story around the product to kind of get their head around it. So that's awesome. Thanks for doing that. Now, this has been incredible. I mean, I want to go out on a limb and say this is going to be one of the most helpful episodes we've had. But I want to end with a few final questions here. And these are kind of what I call the fortune cookie questions. We've talked about the deep stuff, the meaty stuff. This is the pithy one-liners where it doesn't always apply, right?
Okay.
So, the first one is, what's the best inbound tactic that you've ever done yourself or that you've seen someone else do? Just the single thing where you're like, it may not be repeatable, there may not be takeaways from it, but that was awesome and they pulled it off.
I was really, really impressed by a company called Minted out of San Francisco. This might not be the most impressive one, but it's definitely top 10 and at the top of my head right now. And they essentially had a program where you could get a free card, and Minted makes these lovely cards, holiday cards or birthday cards or wedding invitations, that kind of stuff, right? Printed stationery cards, but it's crowdsourced design. So it's essentially a bunch of designers competing for the most beautiful and best cards, and they're just really awesome, right? It's like Hallmark times 100. And the cool thing that they did is they had you, if you connect your Facebook account, you can send free cards to people, and there were two genius parts of it. One genius part of it was when you connected your Facebook account, what it would go and do for you was look at your friends' birthdays and tell you whose birthday you just missed or was about to come up, so that you could send them a free card immediately, and then it would auto-personalize to that friend. It was just genius. Like, it was just this click, oh, and the completion rate for them, I'm sure, was insane. Yeah. The other really smart thing that they did is, because they knew that, I mean, their cards cost money, right? Like, it costs money for them to print, it costs money for them to ship, so they can't be offering this for free. And so they were actually really careful not to send the URL all over the web. They shared it specifically with primarily women bloggers. They went out, got developed a big list of women bloggers, reached out to them and said, hey, we're doing this offer, feel free to check it out. And they didn't even say promote it on your blog. But those people went, they signed up for it, they did it. It was genius. And then the other incredible thing is they now have everybody's Facebook address book right in their product. So when you sign into Minted, it's just, there's your friends right there. You don't have to go and enter everybody. Such a smart use of social connection.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that story because, we always look to Spotify as the poster child for Facebook integration, and we always have a hard time finding, well, who else has done it? Because it's just, there's not great examples of long-term kind of deep integrations, and that's a great one. It's a company that's not as known as Spotify, and yet look at all the genius things they've done to really make it work for them. The last question I have
they knew their viral coefficient really well, right? So they knew, hey, when someone sees one of our cards, they'll never buy a crappy Hallmark card again. And once they see how convenient it is to do it on the web, they'll never go back to, filling out everybody's address at the kitchen table for 3 nights around Christmas.
Yeah, sounds
So,
good to me. All
super
right,
smart.
last question here. What's the best advice that you have for any startup that's trying to grow?
Best advice I have for startups that are trying to grow.
No pressure.
Yeah, gosh. I think it's going to be around hiring. As you are growing and hiring, I think one of the things that, to me, is a clear signal that you're getting the right people on board, especially early stage, but even sort of mid stage, is folks who do the work that will be part of their job for fun. Meaning, if you are hiring a software engineer and they've never done a commit to GitHub other than what was part of their job, right, wherever they were working, that's a little weird to me. Like that, if you're really a passionate software engineer, and I know tons of them, right? I mean, there's our engineering team is nearly 70 people at Moz. I know those folks, right? Like they love those side projects and putting stuff together and doing little commits and open source contributions, that kind of stuff. Same story with marketers. If you have someone who they've never invested anything in any of their social accounts, they've never done any blogging on their own site, they've never sort of produced a slideshare or made some video content or any of that stuff except for work, not a great signal. So for startups out there, if you're looking for hiring, I think that's a good bar. And if you're a professional in the field, you should make sure that whatever you're doing is your passion and that you spend some of that time on yourself.
Yeah.
Right? If you love doing what you're doing, do some of it for you.
And people don't realize how that is the resume now.
It is.
Like think about Growth Hacker TV. I can get a job growth at a lot of different places now because of this, not because I went out and asked for a job to do it. You know what I mean?
That's right. That's
but
right.
Nobody asked me to do Growth Hacker TV. I just decided to do it. And so,
exactly.
But that's true with a million different other scenarios. Like just go and do something awesome, and that becomes your resume, and that's what people are going to look for to hire anyway. So I think it's great advice to end on. Rand, thank you again for having an awesome episode on Growth Hacker TV.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, Bronson.